Well, the adventures of the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday may be over for now on our TV screens, but the adventure is only just beginning within the book form, as in today's Doctor Who product review I'm going to be taking a look at the first of 3 adventures with the 15th Doctor released by Penguin Books, starting off with Ruby Red as written by Georgia Cook. This book has also been released alongside Caged as written by Una McCormack, with a 3rd story due on the way later this year. The overall presentation of the book is really pretty. It is a hardback novel, so we do have a dust jacket with the hardback on the inside. I think that this version of the Doctor Who logo works really well at the top. The font on the title is rather simple but effective. It's bold, not particularly that exciting. And of course, welcome to Georgia Cook, writing her first ever Doctor Who book. Cover art itself is really striking. Lee Binding, the brilliant Lee Binding, has done an excellent job here. I love the choice of imagery with the 15th Doctor and Ruby. They're not particularly overused photos, unlike some of the other promotional material that has been released around this time period, which is nice. Loving the specifically book references around the side, including the wolf and the soldier with the glowing possessed red eyes. And I believe that this is in fact Ran, more on her a little bit later on. The whole colour scheme looks incredibly wintry, very icy, very snowy. I love how the TARDIS is positioned on the lake, again referencing the actual events within the book. The spine is also really nice, of course Doctor Who logo, the title and the BBC logo there at the bottom as well. Breaking mould really from other Doctor Who books released in conjunction with the TV show. There's no description, there's no story synopsis or anything like that, but we do have this lovely colour scheme continuing. Again, this lovely icy design, accompanied with a rather mysterious quote. Again, loving the hints to the location in the background, the various camps, and of course the soldiers with the diamond design Doctor Who logo. The story synopsis has in fact been moved to the inside of the jacket, and on the opposite side a little bit of additional information about the author. Font size and layout actually got along really well with this book. As a dyslexic, I found that it was very pleasant to read overall. Overall design and layout for these books has regenerated quite considerably since back in the day. Of course, these used to be printed hardcover books, now we have a dust jacket. To be honest, I think I would have preferred it being printed on rather than it being a dust jacket, although I imagine that's more expensive. You don't really see that too much these days. I am loving the consistency between all of the 15th Doctor books released so far. Particularly love that the spines are nearly identical as well, meaning between TV stories and non-TV stories there actually isn't too much in it, so you can fit them all on the shelf together and have them all in a nice timeline. So the TARDIS lands in 1242, medieval Russia, in response to a distress call sent by Ranavir, a girl not from Earth. And she is caught between the War of Estonia and Novgorod, and she is forced to fight in the war as a test by her family. Isn't that nice? And it is soon clear that aside from Ran and her war-fighting sisters, Selisimir and Helgadin, sent of course to ensure that Ran fights within the war, there is another alien presence lurking within the ice of the nearby lake. And said presence threatens not only the course of human history by interfering within the historical events of the war, but also the threat of enslaving the entirety of humanity altogether. So in other words, for Doctor Who, just the average Thursday. Coming in at just over 200 pages, this book is a rather rapid read. The chapters are concise, they keep up the momentum of the story, and I like the hurdles that the Doctor and co face throughout. It's a story I imagine readers will get through quite quickly. As a dyslexic too, personally, I found the book's structure really easy to follow. The vocabulary is nicely descriptive, it brings medieval Russia alive, the TARDIS duo being in the depths of this cold and icy winter. I think it is a very imaginative book, but also the way in which that the sisters are described. They leap off the page, and their character personalities are bold. Even though we don't visit their home as such within this story, I feel like you can guess where they've came from. I can visualise the characters, I can imagine them having quite the presence. And of course the joy of books, I think, is that we can take a little bit more time to explore the dynamics between characters. Ranavir, or Ran for short, is this really intriguing yet troubled character. She knows her own beliefs and identity, but she is being forced to take up the family tradition and fight. But in reality, she's a thinker, an inventor, she's intelligent and smart, but also she's shackled by the traditions of her family. This then goes on to affect her confidence, and I think it's really nice seeing the character gradually come out of her shell as the story progresses. As a reader, it feels really rewarding. You're going on a journey with this character. The way in which that she also interacts with Ruby in this story as well. Of course, both two rather young women, there are ties to their past that then influences their present, influencing their own self-identity. And of course, that is quite relevant to Ruby too, of course. She is thinking back to her past quite a lot, being a foundling, Ruby Road and all of that. And I thought that this was really clever. It was a great link to the TV series and rewarding for the readers to explore without not directly tying to the events of the TV series as such. There is a few rather nice descriptive moments throughout as we see the Doctor from Ruby's perspective too, and the way that she is still in her early travels within the TARDIS team. Although I say that, I'm presuming it. I'm presuming that this episode is perhaps from the first half of the series, although due to the way that Season 1 is formatted and the many different time references that we get within those early episodes, it's very difficult to tell, but that, to be honest, is a criticism of the actual TV series rather than this book. But I did find it quite difficult to place this story, I think, within the runtime of the series, because the whole series feels like very early on in Ruby's travels, to be honest. It feels like that we've barely even started by this point. I thought that Ruby was nicely written, interactions with the Doctor presented. These are two friends exploring the universe, but I do think the title of the book can be a little bit misleading. Now, I do love a good clever use of words. It is a little bit of a double meaning. Don't go into this story, as I did, expecting a narrative which is focused entirely around Ruby. In fact, there's not much link in this story to Ruby as a character whatsoever. As I mentioned, it's just a play on words, and if anything, the Ruby Red title comes from the glowing red eyes of the possessed within the episode, and not Ruby Sunday. I thought that it was going to be like a good Doctor kind of situation with the 13th Doctor, where we have a very, very strong character piece, but this one, as I say, it's just a play on words, which I don't mind, just don't get misled. Now, the story itself does take complete advantage over the reader's imagination, which is excellent. Of course, there is no budget constraints to a book, so the final showdown does feel very cinematic. The way the lake is used, the visual description of the characters gasping for breath as they swim around the lake and get plunged into its depths are all just brilliant. It definitely ramps up the stakes. I do really like as well how the story progresses in those later chapters as the Doctor and Ruby are of course getting hands-on. They're saving the day, they're defeating the enemy and all of that. We don't just have a focus on the Doctor and Ruby. They're not the only ones saving the day. The supporting characters are also very hands-on too. They're not just standing by and letting the Doctor and Ruby do everything. They're directly involved within the situation. I felt really invested in Ran. I wanted to see her develop as a character, and we definitely got that. I love the way that her sisters are also involved within that, observing Ran come out of her shell, but also the journey that that takes their relationship on, the way that their perspectives of each other do change. And I think that that is great for a book, because usually a book might need multiple different, not important characters to steer the story forward. But if anything, Ruby Red actually focuses a lot on its main characters. We have a rather small cast for this one, and I felt quite invested in all of them, which is actually really good. I think that Georgia Cook has a confidence in her characters, a confidence that they're leaping off the page, and it definitely pays off. The historical aspects, I would say, are somewhat abandoned within the second half of the story. The imminent battle becomes less of a focus, and it becomes more about the story's actual foe, being the Gentrix. So it's almost a half-y-half historical, but with that very, very strong sci-fi involvement. And I do think that some may not like this, particularly if you are more of the historical camp when it comes to Doctor Who storytelling, which is usually the camp that I'm a part of. But on this occasion, within this story, I actually really enjoyed the sci-fi focus, because the foe itself, the Gentrix, was just a brilliant read. I thought that they were a really intriguing character. The Gentrix is quite a mysterious force. I particularly liked the squid parasite soldiers in the book's early chapters, the way that they cling to their victims' necks. Again, the way that this is written is in fact really creepy and sinister. It almost strays down the territory of psychological and body horror, particularly how the book describes people losing their sense of self and losing control over their limbs. It's almost like a very grim fever dream or nightmare. And of course too, having your mind taken over within a story that is actually written down works very, very well, because you can get right into the head of the character and see how thoughts of the foe that is taking over their brain is influencing them. You understand the characters' thoughts and feelings much easier perhaps than you do on TV. I do also think that it is quite interesting that as a reader I felt really well informed around Rand's homeworld and Selissimia's homeworld and Helgadin's upbringing, the way that that has informed who they are as people, and despite us not actually travelling there as the audience, I felt like I do have a very good idea about what their traditions are and how that has informed who they are as people, for the better and for the worst. So let's end out this review talking about the Doctor himself. The writing of New Who Doctors within their first tie-in books to the TV series is always quite the curious thing. Often being written prior to the TV series broadcast, of course the writers are given a little bit of material to go on, but sometimes it can leave behind a slightly different interpretation of that particular incarnation. The first lot, and I think in fact only, TV books for the 13th Doctor really spring to mind. Whilst my memories of those books are a little bit blurred, I can recall the way the 13th Doctor being written is in fact quite different to the TV 13th Doctor. And I often also see quite a lot of people saying that 13 in extended media and her stories within those medias are in fact better than what we got on screen. I know particularly the book The Good Doctor does creep up quite a lot as well. So for that reason I am always a little bit worried. Are we just going to get a carbon copy Doctor that doesn't have too much personality? But no, I think this book does a good job. 15 has a lot of energy. I think Georgia captures that really well. He is young, he has an excited outlook on the universe. He is a more casual Doctor, laid back, but not a character that you want to cross. I think the vocabulary is very cleverly written as well. He's very chilled, very contemporary. He does get stuck in right away, perhaps sometimes without thinking, so I think all of that does match Ncuti's portrayal quite well. I like how Georgia introduces little gadgets into the story, showing Rand's sense of innovation, but also how the Doctor responds to this. There is a respect instantly between them. 15 can be a little bit reckless at times. The enemy showdown is quite interesting at the very end. I don't think it quite delivers a big Doctor moment, which part of me was somewhat expecting. I certainly wouldn't go as far to say that it is a crucial read for 15th Doctor fans, but it is still enjoyable. It expands a little bit what we got to see on screen. And to be honest, if you are a fan of 15, I imagine you're probably going to want as much content as possible, as in my opinion, it's one of the main downfalls of the most recent series. It ended so quickly and it didn't really have too much time to breathe, so an additional adventure or two is certainly appreciated. So there we go, that is my review of the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday adventure, Ruby Red, as written by Georgia Cook. A really enjoyable read. I got through this one very quickly. The locations are atmospheric, the supporting characters really leap off the page, and the vocabulary overall I think is really accessible, and it really brings the adventure overall to life. This book was also released alongside another 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday adventure, Caged, as written by Una McCormack, and hopefully a book review of that will also be on the way soon. So thanks for watching, have a nice day, and I shall see you all next time.